Testing, testing, 1098, 765, 4321. Testing, testing, 1098, 765, 4321. Sounds like a good sound check to you. This will be about what people speak at, give or take. But they'll probably be louder than I am right now. Testing, testing. Good?
We will begin the meeting in 1 minute. Good morning. The August 12th School Financing Review Commission meeting will come to order. Good morning and welcome to the August 12th, 2025 School Financing Review Commission. I am the Commissioner of Education, Brian Maher. According to Robert's Rules of Orders, in the absence of the Secretary, it is appropriate for the Chair to appoint a temporary Secretary to record the minutes and assist with clerical duties for the duration of this meeting. Pursuant to Nebraska Revised Statute 79-10-147.01, the State Department of Education may provide staff to assist as needed and requested by the chairperson of the Commission in accordance with the guidelines developed by the Commission. The Chair hereby appoints Ryan Fohr to serve as temporary Secretary. I will tell you that the microphones that you see in front of you, you'll need to share those. But I'll need you to do a couple of things in terms of the microphones. Number one, make sure that you turn them on before speaking. You'll know that when the green light turns on. We need that not only for amplification within this room, but we need that for the broadcast as this meeting is being broadcast around the state. So please turn the microphone on before you speak, and then remember to turn it off after you speak, because we are limited with the number of folks who can be on at any one time. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Tom Breezy. Here. Elliot Bostar. Jason Dolliver. Here. Ann Foster. Here. Shavonna Holman. Present. Jana Hughes. Here. Grant Latimer. Here. Luann Linehan. Here. Brian Maher.
Here.
Fred Meyer. Dave Merman. Aaron Ploss. Here. Keith Runge. Here. John Schwartz. Here. Sarah Scott. Here. Liz Standish. Here. Paul Turman. Quorum is established.
We have a quorum. In consultation with the Attorney General's office, it was determined that the 3 members of the legislature who are non-voting members do not count toward establishment of a quorum. Therefore, for a quorum to be established, there must be a minimum of 8 voting members present. And there are 12 voting members present. A quorum is established. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted as you enter the room from the main entrance doors. Commission members, note that we have provided a copy of the outlines of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act and the Nebraska Public Records statutes for each commission member. Please note that both of these sets of statutes apply to this commission and to its members. Okay, that's a lot of formal stuff. Welcome. Thanks for coming to the Department of Education here this morning. We are faced with an interesting task to really get something accomplished for the state of Nebraska. And I don't know if any of you noticed, but there is no expiration date for this commission. So I'd like to challenge all of you to really put on your accelerated hats and let's get something done today, and maybe this will be it. Okay, that's as funny as the jokes get right there. But we do have our work cut out for us. It is serious work. And to that end, I am pleased that Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen is here to address this commission this morning. Governor Pillen, the mic is yours.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for saying yes to serve on the commission. I don't know about you, but the last time I went into a school building and the door was opened, I was in deep trouble. So I don't know what that means when I saw the door being opened this morning when I came in. But, I think that it's a great opportunity for everybody around the table to really do some critical thinking about how we educate our children and how we fund it. And what the opportunities are for the future. My simple ask would be that everybody comes with no preconceived ideas. Everybody comes and forgets everything you knew about it before and say, what do we need today? Where are we setting today? What's best for the 244 public school districts? I think everybody's heard me enough in the 3 years that I've had the privilege to be, almost 3 years, to be your governor, that it's about kids, taxes, agriculture, values, and this commission's going to be pretty well focused on kids and taxes. And it's critical. We all agree. We never, ever give up on a kid. Our kids are our future. We can't let one be left behind. It's really, really important, really important that we have a funding mechanism that gives us a chance to have transformative tax policy change for the state of Nebraska. It's just absolutely essential. I'm a believer, 5 years ago when we started campaigning, one epiphany to me was when I learned out of 244 school districts at that time it was 180 school districts that did not get virtually no money from the state. 180 out of the 244. And I think today now, as things have kept evolving, I think today it would be 204 of the 244 school districts take away the foundation aid of the equalization formula. So those are, and then if you take the clock back 25 years in 2000, or 20 years in 2005, it was either 2000 or 2005. At that time, we had 224 school districts of the 244 that was getting equalization aid and getting funding from the state. So the funding from the state has done nothing but go down every day and doing nothing but putting on our backs a property tax. And I think the Constitution is really clear. Our responsibility in the state of Nebraska, the responsibility of government is to keep us safe, to have infrastructure, educate our children. I'm a big-time believer the state needs to be way more heavily involved in funding education, and I hope that you'll have robust discussions about that. And a gigantic thank you. Lastly, I'd say it all the time, those of you that have committed your lives to education, thank you. I ask it all the time. Maybe it's for everybody in the room this morning. Who are the three most important people that have impacted your lives? I'll bet the farm, Josh. One of the three, or either a coach or a teacher, sometimes two of the three, depending on the circumstances. So again, I think it's really, really important, and when we can fund education and when we can decrease bureaucracy, we can pay teachers more, and that's a critical part of this process as well. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for the governor?
Well, let me just simply say thank you to everybody. An infinite time's a long time, but hopefully, what's John Wooden say? Go quick, but not too fast. Thank you.
Governor, thanks for kicking off this commission this morning with your words, but also with your presence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on agenda item number 4. You will see on the handout the membership of the commission in accordance with Nebraska Revised Statute 79-10, 147.01. I'd like to take a minute at this time for each member present to introduce yourself, include the seat that you were appointed to, and where you are from. I will start and we will go around to my left. Again, I'm Brian Maher. I'm the Commissioner of Education. I'm actually appointed to this board from the very statute itself. So I appreciate having the opportunity to sit with the talent that's in this room, and hopefully we can make a difference on how schools are funded in the state of Nebraska. And I'm from Lincoln.
I'm Elliot Bostar. I serve in the Nebraska Legislature representing District 29, and I was appointed by the Revenue Committee by Chairman Von Gillerin, and I am from Lincoln.
Hi, I'm Senator Jana Hughes, District 24, which is Seward, York, Polk, and a little bit of Butler County, and we have trees down everywhere. So I've been farm gymming it this weekend, hauling tree limbs out of our property. But happy to be here. I was appointed by the executive board. I'm the at-large senator representative here, so non-voting member. So thanks. And I also have to say, this is probably my fault that you're all here, so you're welcome. And I'm really happy to see you guys here, because I'm really hopeful for what we can accomplish and this ongoing discussion with it. So it's super important for Nebraska. Thank you.
I'm Sarah Scott. I'm the property tax administrator, also appointed by the statute. I am from the North Platte area. I live north of North Platte. I spend a few days a week here and a few days a week out there. I've been with the Department of Revenue for 16 years. We have a ton of data, a ton of information, and I'm just happy to be here to assist.
Good morning. I'm Luann Linehan. I am an at-large member. I was just informed. Thank you. I live in Elkhorn. I grew up in southeast Nebraska on a farm, so I've always felt like I had like a foot in both places, in rural Nebraska and in urban Nebraska. So I'm really hopeful that this group can see from both those points of views, and we can find a united answer that answers both their significant and different kind of challenges. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm John Schwartz. I'm the superintendent for Millard Public Schools, and I'm an at-large appointee as well, and I live in the Omaha area.
Good morning. My name is Aaron Plaza. I'm the superintendent at Bennington Public Schools. This would be my third year at Bennington. Prior to that, I was also in Columbus and York, and so kind of been all around the state and all different school districts. Excited to serve in the Class 3 superintendent position.
I'm Keith Runge. I'm a school board member for Columbus Lakeview. Been on the board 19 years. Live in Columbus, farm, and own a business in Columbus.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Dolliver. I'm the superintendent of Pender Public Schools, which is up in northeast Nebraska. Just starting my 20th year in the district and 17th as the superintendent there. So all of my administrative years in education have been in the small town of Pender, Nebraska, and it's a great place to live, work, and raise a family, and I'm just proud to be a part of this group and looking forward to getting some things done.
Good morning. My name is Liz Standish. I'm the Associate Superintendent for Business Affairs for Lincoln Public Schools, and I'm here representing the Class 4 School District Administrator.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Shavonna Holman, school board member for 8 years for the Omaha Public Schools, appointed by statute of this commission, born and raised in Omaha, and also looking forward to serving on this commission and having the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Tom Breezy. I'm a corn and soybean farmer from the Elbin area in Boone County. I also serve as state treasurer. I'm an at-large member of this group. Excited about the opportunity that this formation of this commission presents, and I think we have a tremendous opportunity here to make some very good suggestions going forward. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ann Foster. I'm the superintendent at Brady Public Schools. If you don't know where Brady is, the best way to explain that is that it's equidistance between Denver and Omaha along I-80. So I've been there for going into my third year, and I am proud to support and represent Class 1 school districts.
Morning. My name is Grant Latimer. I serve as the governor's representative, and I live in Gretna.
Good morning. I'm State Senator Dave Merman. I'm from Glenville, a farmer, dairy farmer and grain farmer. I represent District 38 in the state legislature, and that is all or part of 8 counties in southern Nebraska.
Well, thank you, everybody, for being here, and thank you for being a part of this commission. We are still in a fairly formal role, but before I get back into the formal piece of this, if you're wondering, well, how did the commissioner decide that this was going to be so formal? How did he decide that we were going to be a public body? And I would tell you that the commissioner did not decide that, but the Attorney General did, and so we are a public body, and that's why we are following the open meetings rules that we've gone through here this morning. Also, a couple of housekeeping rules. If any member of the commission would like something to drink or a very small snack, we do have a table over there for your access. Also, I will have breaks here this morning as we go. If those breaks do not meet your schedule, please know that there are bathrooms just out this door to your right, just down the hall to your right, or there are bathrooms in the lobby area where you came in. So we will now move back to agenda item number 5. Is there a motion on agenda item number 5? If, yeah.
I'll second.
It is moved and seconded to adopt the proposed temporary operating policies to be in effect until permanent operating policies are adopted. Is there any discussion on the motion? Would the secretary please call the roll?
Tom Breezy.
Yes.
Jason Dolliver.
Yes.
Ann Foster.
Yes.
Shavonna Holman.
Yes.
Grant Latimer.
Yes.
Luann Linehan.
Yes.
Brian Maher.
Yes.
Fred Meyer. Aaron Ploss.
Yes.
Keith Runge.
Yes.
John Schwartz.
Yes.
Sarah Scott.
Yes.
Liz Standish.
Yes.
Paul Turman. 12 yes.
The affirmative has it, and the motion to adopt the proposed temporary operating policies to be in effect until permanent operating policies are adopted is adopted. Item number 6. Is there a motion on item number 6?
Breezy seeking recognition. Breezy had his hand up.
I'll move to adopt the motion that a committee of 3 be appointed by the chair to draft permanent operating policies for the commission.
Second.
It is moved and seconded that the chair appoint a committee of 3 members to draft permanent operating policies for the commission and report at the next meeting. Is there any discussion on the motion? Would the temporary secretary please call the roll?
Ann Foster.
Yes.
Shavonna Holman.
Yes.
Grant Latimer.
Yes.
Luann Linehan.
Yes.
Brian Maher.
Yes.
Fred Meyer. Aaron Ploss.
Yes.
Keith Runge.
Yes.
John Schwartz.
Yes.
Sarah Scott.
Yes.
Liz Standish.
Yes.
Paul Turman. Tom Breezy.
Yes.
Jason Dolliver.
Yes.
12 yes.
The affirmative has it, and the motion that the chair appoint a committee of 3 members to draft permanent operating policies for the next commission and report at the next meeting is adopted. The chair will take recommendations for committee membership and will notify commission members next week who will serve on this committee, including the charge for the next steps for the committee. On to agenda item number 7. The Nebraska Revised Statute 79-10147.02 set forth the purpose of the School Financing Review Commission. A summary of the purpose is provided in the handout. I want you to take a minute and review that. This comes straight out of statute. And if we need to highlight any of the provisions for the School Financing Review Commission duties, let's do that. But I will take a minute here to let you review what you have in front of you. It is 79-10147.02, School Financing Review Commission duties. You know, I wasn't going to read this, but I think I will. I think we have a good audience here in the room, and I can imagine we have tens of people listening across the state. Gotcha, okay, good. The purpose of the School Financing and Review Commission is to study and provide advisory recommendations relating to school funding in Nebraska. And the statute goes on to say that the commission shall evaluate the school funding formula for education under TIOSA and make recommendations for adjustments or changes to such formula that may be necessary to help prevent the increase of property taxes. A second provision is that the commission will regularly review the resources side of the formula under TIOSA. We will also regularly review the needs side of the formula under TIOSA. We will analyze options for how to minimize the negative impact on schools during times when the state may be unable to fully fund the formula under TIOSA. A fifth provision is to analyze the impact of funding for education on student achievement and outcomes, focusing on, but not limited to, access to early childhood education, student attendance, literacy, graduation rate, college-going rate, and post-secondary workforce participation. A sixth provision is to analyze the impact of funding for education on issues and resources impacting students with relatively high needs, including, but not limited to, students who live in areas of high concentrations of poverty, students with an individualized education program, and students with limited English proficiency. The School Financing Review Commission, to the extent it is practical, shall compare findings from Subdivision 1A of this section to similar policies from other states. And also, by December 1st of this calendar year, and by November 1st of every subsequent year, the Commission shall prepare and electronically deliver to the Clerk of the Legislature an annual report with the observations and recommendations developed pursuant to subsection 1 of this section. So that is our charge. Any comments? Okay. We're on to agenda item 8. Pursuant to Nebraska Revised Statute 79-10147.01, the Commission shall elect a vice chairperson from among its members. We will now conduct the election for vice chairperson. I appoint Ryan Four to serve as the teller. The teller's role is to disseminate and count the ballots. We have we'll pass the ballots out. The teller will record each round of voting on the teller report and will announce the results of each round of voting. Upon hearing the teller report, I will declare the result of the election. The ballots and teller reports will be placed in the custody of the chairperson and will be kept under seal until the time period of a recount expires, at which time the ballots and teller reports will be destroyed. A majority vote of voting members of the commission is required for an election. Abstentions and blank ballots do not count as votes cast. Illegible ballots ballots with multiple names, or ballots for anyone other than a current commission member are not credited to any candidate. When voting, please write the first and last name of the member on the ballot. In a moment, I will call for nominations for the office of vice chairperson. No seconds are required for nominations. A member may nominate himself or herself. No member may nominate more personas than there are places to fill. Votes may be cast for any current commission member, even if they are not nominated. Once nominations are closed, no further discussion or debate is in order. And I might take a liberty to go off script here for a second and tell you that the last time we voted in this room for a chairperson or a vice chairperson, It took 54 ballots. I'm hoping we can break that record today, or not break that record today. Does any commission member have questions about the election process? Okay. Nominations are now in order for the office of Vice Chairperson.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to nominate Tom Breezy, and for 3 important reasons. Ag trust him. He worked in the legislature, and it was clear from we were in the same class, so for 6 years, that if Tom talked to him, Ag would trust what we were doing. So I think it's really important that we have somebody that Ag can trust. He also, though he never talks about it, he has a law degree, so he is capable of writing laws. And maybe the main reason, or another important reason, is he was willing, as many aren't, to talk about other taxes to pay for schools besides property taxes. His first year, he introduced bills to increase sales taxes on almost everything. And he stuck with that the whole time he was in the legislature. So I think he would be a great individual to help lead us. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Breezy is nominated. Are there any further nominations for the office of Vice Chairperson?
I would nominate John Schwartz for the position for several reasons. Dr. Schwartz has been in many schools throughout the state of Nebraska, big and small, and so I think he has a nice perspective throughout the state. He's a leader in education on several different committees and organizations throughout the entire state with a reach in education. He is the sitting superintendent of the year and also knows the school funding formula forwards and backwards, so I would nominate Dr. Schwartz.
John Schwartz is nominated. Are there any further nominations for the office of Vice Chairperson? I'll ask one more time. Are there any further nominations for Vice Chairperson? Nominations are closed. There will be no further discussion or debate while voting occurs for Vice Chairperson. The ballots for Vice Chairperson are being disseminated by Secretary 4. Hand your completed ballot to the teller. Have all voted who wish to do so? Voting is closed.
Mr. Chair, I have the teller report. There were 12 votes cast. A majority necessary for election is 7. Tom Breezy received 5 votes. John Schwartz received 7 votes.
John Schwartz is elected vice chairperson. We'll move to agenda item number 9. For the next agenda item, I have asked Nebraska Department of Education staff members Brian Halstead and Bryce Wilson to provide information on the history of school finance and the current state of school finance, respectively. Following this information, we'll engage in a discussion on the goals and outcomes of the commission. You may be looking at the agenda and going, my gosh, we're really getting through here quickly on a 12-item agenda. We're already on item number 9. We'll slow it down significantly at this point. So with that, I will turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Brian Halstead.
Good morning, Brian Halstead, Deputy Commissioner, Nebraska Department of Education. When the commissioner asked myself and Bryce to do a presentation, Bryce made it clear it'd take 3 hours for him to get through all of his knowledge, so I get no more than 15 minutes in this 1-hour presentation. The topical area that the commissioner asked me to speak to was history of school finance. I am not going to go through the document that Senator Hughes has already shared with all of you that legislative research has compiled together. The history I'm going to talk about is only going to go back 37 years. There was a prior School Finance Review Commission that the legislature created in 1988, in the sense that it's not showing up there. I don't know why. In that regard, in 1988, the legislature created a School Finance Review Commission. Some of the membership on that commission is similar to this one, but not identical. It had a charge to look into and investigate other alternatives to funding schools because the state of Nebraska had largely relied on property taxes up to that time. That commission held its meeting starting the end of August 1988. It ceased to exist on June 30th, 1990, because that was the date the legislature set for it to produce information and recommendations back to the legislature. They held over 20 public meetings, so you've got one down today. They held 5 public hearings. Those hearings were conducted throughout the state of Nebraska. Go wait for Mr. Wilson to get this up on the screen for others. There we go. So as you can see, in less than 2 years period of time, they did a lot of work. They found 2 major problems with the funding of public schools in Nebraska. There was an excessive burden on property taxes, and at that time, property taxes were close to 70% of all the funding. They also discovered at that time that that overemphasis on property tax did not provide for an adequate equalization of the abilities to assure all students in Nebraska would have the services they need to be educated. The inequity of property taxation and no other means of addressing the problem. So they knew they had a lot of work to do. Next slide. They first thought they needed to reach a consensus on the important goals and objectives of providing state support to schools, because there was a feeling in Nebraska, oh, wait a minute, we're local control in Nebraska. If you guys are going to provide more funding, what's that mean for everybody? So they were faced with a fundamental question of what are the overriding principles and beliefs about the purpose of state involvement in the financial support of public school systems. And they came up with the following three things. First, to assure all Nebraska children an equal opportunity for an appropriate education regardless of where the children may live in the state. Second, to provide broad and stable system of financial support for public schools through appropriate mixture of revenue sources. And three, to provide equalization of fiscal ability and financial support among the districts and taxpayers through a distribution formula which recognizes school district needs and school district wealth. And you can see they defined wealth as it relates to the school district's ability to provide the services needed and the taxpayer's ability to pay for such services needed to include a consideration of income tax revenues as well as property tax revenues. They spent the next year and a half going through that and came up with 5 recommendations. Their first, 20% of all income tax revenues should be dedicated to the support of the public schools, with 20% of individual income tax proceeds which are attributable to a specific school district should be returned directly to that school district. Number 2, implementation of a new equalization formula for aid from the state based on the realistic needs of schools and which considers all accessible resources of schools, including income tax revenue returned to the schools, and which is sensitive to the income wealth of school districts as well as property tax wealth of the district. Third, implementation of rational, effective growth limitations for school budgets which are sensitive to local differences, yet assure a substantial level of property tax relief. 4, a school finance plan be funded on an ongoing and sustainable basis from appropriate increases in state sales and/or income taxes as determined by the legislature. So they recognize it's going to be up to the legislature as to how this is going to be funded and how it will continue to be funded. And the 5th recommendation, an increase in the overall level of state support to effectuate. First, a 15% aggregate reduction in property taxes to be levied. So we're talking total property taxes at that time, or 20% reduction in the property taxes to be levied for school purposes. They clearly saw that school districts were heavily reliant on property taxes, and that's where most property taxes went in 1988, 1989. They also said state funding from all state sources be maintained at a target level of 45% of the aggregate general fund operating expenditures of schools districts. So they came forward with a plan. Their plan included two bills. The first was LB 259 that called for the affiliation of all property in the state be done such that all property was supporting elementary and secondary education. At the time, in the 1989-1990 school year, the state of Nebraska had 838 school districts. What I would tell you is that's a drastic improvement over 1920 when there were 7,240 school districts in this state. At that time, there were 307,568 students enrolled in those public school districts. So they knew they had to deal with an issue of ensuring that the property wealth was actually funding elementary and secondary education, which it wasn't at that time. The second part of the plan is what everybody talks about these days. It's LB 1059, which created the Tax Equity and Educational Opportunities Support Act. That act also had a committee that was charged with reviewing annually the operations of that and reporting the data as to how well they were meeting the recommendations set forth in the plan. I note up there that committee was legislatively created. It was eliminated in the second special session of 2002. So there was a committee that existed for 13 years. If you note, it's the second special session of 2002, which by Constitution is supposed to be the 60-day session when they meet. The legislature in 2002 had 3 special sessions. And if you remember correctly, there was a little bit of an economic downturn going on in Nebraska at that time and a number of other major events that had occurred in our country at that whole point in time. So you all have been created. When I looked at the law that the legislature just adopted, I would tell you, you are somewhat a commission and a committee from the 1990s legislation. Some of what you're charged to do is ongoing. Some of the work of the committee was every year produce a report. How well are you doing? But you're not quite the same as it was back then. So in a sense, that's kind of the background as to where TIOSA came from and where the prior commission that had previously been enacted produced a result in that regard. I'm going to stop there and hand it over to Mr. Wilson, who knows all the numbers, and hopefully I gave him enough time to get through all the detail he's going to cover as to where we are today.
I am going to cover more of the school finance picture in total, not just TIOSA. I want to really step into everything that's involved with school finance. So before I get too far down that path and start on the different funds, I do got to say, as an accountant and somebody who's always dealing with budgets and numbers, when I hear people talk about anything money, it just kind of catches my ear. And so I was out the other day and I heard somebody say, I mean, I'm sure you've all heard this saying, but money talks. And all I could think about as I walked away was, with 3 kids involved in everything, I think my money just waves goodbye. But I'm going to cover first, I want to jump into, I'm sure everybody here is well aware that property taxes are the main contributor of school finance. And so I want to start in that area. But I'm going to start with a quiz and just check and see where we're at as a group and see who knows how many taxing funds a school district has available to use. Anybody? I know a couple of you know this answer. So there's 4 taxing funds. that a school district can use. We're going to start with the main one. The general fund is the main place that you're going to see school district activity take place, but it's also the main fund that school districts use for taxation. So using the 2023-24 annual financial report data, which is the latest that we have available at this time, there was a little over $2.7 billion that was taxed between the four taxing funds. Out of that $2.7 billion, $2.3 billion of that was in the general fund. So you can see 84%, the vast majority of school taxation does occur in the general fund, but that is where we support school districts' main purpose of educating the children and doing all the work that goes along with that. I think it's really important to note and understand that when we talk about the general fund and the expenditures that occur there, 75 to 80% of those expenditures are for staff. It's salaries and benefits there. That's by far the biggest portion of the general fund taxation. So that's going to be your teachers, your paras, everybody that's involved with educating those kids. So that's the main part. It is also important to note, and we're going to talk about real quickly, the mechanisms that are in state statute that limit school district spending. The general fund is part of the levy restriction and is part of the $5 limit there. So it also, I would note as well that the building fund projects type of stuff that we'll talk about in a second cannot be run through the general fund. So it does stay related to educational type activities only. The next taxing fund is the bond fund. Probably most are aware of this fund, and this is when a school district goes out to a vote of their public, and if they successfully pass a bond vote, they would tax and make payments on that bond through the bond fund. Any building type activities of actually making a building or purchasing land would not run through the bond fund. So since it's only for bond related activities, it's not part of the $5 levy limit. It's outside of that levy limit. The Qualified Capital Purpose Undertaking Fund, this is by far the smallest of any of the four taxing funds used. There's only about 25 million of property taxes that go into this fund each year. It's for the emergency type situations the school district's required to take care of. That's going to be situations like, example I often use is if a fire marshal comes in to a school building, if we have an older school and says, hey, you need to get sprinklers in this building or you're going to get we're going to shut this building down, and you have a year to get that done. The school district may not have time to raise those funds through their building fund or go out to a bond vote, something like that. They've got to get that work done immediately to keep the building open. Or mold abatement, life safety codes, accessibility barriers. One of the new ones that legislature added to this 2 years ago is safety and security infrastructure as well. So those are the main pieces to the Qualified Capital Purpose Undertaking Fund. It is limited now to 3 cents as part of the levy, and that may or may not be part of the $5 levy limit, depending on how a school district uses that, whether they're paying back a bond principal and interest with that 3 cents, or if they're just taxing in there for one of those projects, would determine whether that's part of the $5. And then the last of the four taxing funds is the special building fund. This is where anytime a school district is going to buy land, build a building, do a major renovation, those types of projects, furnish a new building, they're going to use the special building fund to do that. It's restricted to 14 cents maximum, but it is also part of the $5 levy limit. And so if a school district has to be under the $5, they would have to be under 14 cents and stay within those limits to be able to use the building fund. $117 million of property taxes in 23-24 were taxed in the special building fund. And so you kind of see the size of that compared to the general fund. It's much, much smaller. Kind of summing up those taxing funds, it's important to note school districts are not allowed to tax in a fund and use those funds for a different purpose. So a school district can't tax in their general fund and then transfer that money over to the building fund and use it for building fund activities. They are required to use the funds for the purpose in which they taxed for those funds. School districts are allowed to do interfund loans, but those have to be paid back within 2 years. So there's a little flexibility for schools of just the cash flow manage, but ultimately they have to make sure that they are using the funds for the purpose in which they tax for them, and there's nothing there that could mislead the public in that taxation. So when we talk about a school district's taxation, there are really three ways that current state statute limits how a school district can tax, or how much a school district can tax or spend. The most common one that people are aware of is the $5 levy limit. So we limit what their levy can be in total, and that again, as we just kind of went through those funds, it's going to be the general fund, the building fund, and possibly the qualified capital purpose undertaking fund. The bond fund is outside of that $5 levy limit. And when we look at how much that is, that was just showed you there on this slide, it's the levy times the valuation divided by 100 will tell you what that property tax request is going to be. The second way that state statute limits school district spending is called budget authority or spending authority. This applies only to the general fund. Essentially, at the same time that the State Department of Education certifies TIOSA to school districts, we also certify what their budget authority is going to be for the following year. We calculate that three different ways. School districts gets the greatest of those three ways certified to them as budget authority. That's going to be on a budget-based method, which just gives the district 2.5% growth each year. There's also a formula needs method and a student growth method. So if a district is a faster growing district as far as students, likely they might fall into one of those other categories and get a little bit more bump than the 2.5%. In addition to what's certified, there's pieces outside of the certified budget authority school districts can add to their spending, things like special education funding, grants, federal grants, any state, local grants, donations, those types of things can be applied for and added to the budget authority limits. And there are a few other things too, but those are the main ones. Similar, both, and I should also note too, both current state statute allows for levy and budget authority overrides if voted on by the public. So they can go out and get a levy override, the district can. They can also go out and get a budget authority override that adds to their certified amount. And then the last one of the three limits to school district spending or taxation is property tax authority. This is the newest one. I'm sure a lot of the senators that are here are well aware of the work that was done to get that passed a couple of years ago as part of LB 243. This essentially, I think, is really important to note. It's called property tax authority, but really it's a revenue growth limit. And we back into the amount of property taxes that a school district can ask for. So it allows for revenue growth to grow 3% each year, and has a couple other factors that can boost that 3%, such as membership growth, number of students coming into the school district, poverty, or limited English proficiency student growth. Those pieces can add to that 3% annual revenue growth. When we calculate property tax authority, we look at the total revenue, calculate that out, and then we subtract away from that total revenue what the school district's getting for state aid as far as TIOSA funding, what they're getting for special education reimbursement, and then other revenues that we look at in the annual financial report are subtracted out too. What's left is the amount that they can access in property tax authority, and that applies to the general fund and the building fund only. So we're going to get into, as we kind of wrap up this current situation, I think it's really important to walk through how do we currently fund school districts. So looking at the total revenue sources for school districts in the 2023-24 school year, you can see on this chart that the local revenue is by far the biggest piece of that pie, coming in at $2.62 billion or 51% of the total school district funding. Second, also by quite a long ways, is the state revenue at just under $2 billion, and that's about 39%. And then we have federal revenue, which is probably a little higher than normal because it still had the ESSER funds in it from the third round of COVID relief funds at $439 million or 8.64%. And then you see very small county revenue and other revenue in there as well. So we're going to jump into what makes up the $2.62 billion of local revenue. Well, I think everybody here probably knows taxes levied by the school district, as we already noted, is the big piece of that. $2.3 billion of that $2.62, or 88%, is property taxes. The next biggest piece of that is motor vehicle taxes at only 7.6%. And then public power districts sales tax and interest on investments are both around 1.5%. So it's pretty heavily supported by property taxes when we look at the local revenue share of school district support. If we look at the state revenue portion of that, which was the 38% of the total revenue slice of pie when we looked at total revenue for a school district, what's interesting from this one is based on LB 583, this pie graph changed significantly from what it was the year prior. Equalization aid in 23-24 was $525 million. That's down from $886 million the year before. And the big reason for that was the addition of foundation aid. And you'll notice that the other TOSA aid, the dark green on this pie graph, is $655 million. That's now more than equalization aid at 33% of the total state revenue coming in. And again, foundation aid being the big chunk of that, which is about $465 million of the $655 million. So that was a significant change to the state's TIOSA formula. Also worth noting up there, special education funding is a big chunk of the state revenue as well. And that amount significantly changed in 23-24 as well, with LB 583 increasing the reimbursement for special education costs from around 43% to almost to 80% roughly. And that's $451 million or 22%. So those three pieces right there are the vast majority of the state resources going out, but there are obviously other significant ones. The property tax credit is significant at $176 million. Homestead exemption, $63 million, are both pieces where the school district sets their property tax request, and then the state covers that portion for the property taxpayer, and it shows up as a state revenue on this as we account for it in school districts. Apportionment funding on there is the purple one, and that in 23-24 it was $59 million, 3%. And I'm going to explain what that is a little bit more. It's important to note, though, that was $120 million in what we just paid in 2025, a significant jump up, and will likely be more like $80 to $90 million going forward. So there were some changes to the funding that was available there, and that had a pretty big bump, and that goes to all school districts, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then there's a little bit more in categorical programs. That's going to be things for like high ability learners. Now we have the CTE funds from the state that it would show up in that categorical program there as well. So obviously we hear a lot of times, or at least I hear a lot of times, that maybe the phrase, our school district doesn't get any state aid. I tend to push back on that statement a little bit because every school district in the state of Nebraska that's a public school district gets state aid. It is just not equalization aid. So when people say that, typically what they're really meaning is our school district gets no equalization aid. And that is accurate for this upcoming year for 80% of the school districts. So that is accurate to say that they don't receive equalization aid. I think it's important to make sure that people understand equalization aid is, in its simplest form, is needs minus resources. So we go out and we measure a school district's needs, 17 different components that take a look at school district needs, and then we look at their resources. And there's 6 things that make up their resources. If their needs are higher than their resources, I have to do this with hands, it just thinks it makes it easier. If needs are higher than resources, the state comes in and fills that gap with equalization aid. If it's the other way around, then you're part of the 80% that's non-equalized, saying, when we measure your resources locally, you have enough resources that the state doesn't have to make up that difference. You're still getting state aid, you're not getting any equalization aid. And also want to just point out the big 3 factors in equalization aid. When we talk about equalization aid, there's 2 on the need side of the formula. It's the number of students that your district has and how we average the spending for the school districts in what we call an array, which is school districts that are the 10 above you and below you based on the size number of students in their district. So we average that. That is how we determine school district spending for the calculation in TIOSA. And then the big one on the resource side is property tax. So your valuation base is what determines the resources there. So those are the big 3 drivers of equalization aid. Now, going back into some of the other pieces of the state revenue, I just want to make sure people understand what special education funding is. The state reimburses the excess cost for the school age expenditures only. So when we look at total special education cost to a district, they also incur costs from birth up through what we call age 5 or up to school age. That's not reimbursed. It's not part of the state's reimbursement formula. But anything that's school age, so above age 5 or school age through 21 is part of that formula that the state uses to calculate the reimbursement that's submitted and paid the following year. We make the payment to school districts. So we made the 24-25 payments were based on the 23-24 expenditure, so it's a year in arrears, and they're made in 7 payments to school districts from December through June. But again, that's the part that was increased in LB 583 from 42% to 80%. Which was a significant increase. And then apportionment funding is funded with temporary school funds, and that is certified to the Department of Education each February by the State Treasurer's Office. We take the amount certified to us to be distributed, goes to all public school districts, and it's divided by the number of total students by the census count that are 5 to 18 in each district, and then distributed out the same dollar amount per student for every district. So I think that's the highlights that I had. I know there'll be more information. I did want to just put in your notes where you can find more information, as far as you can also look and see what payments each school district gets on our NDE payment information, and more information as far as the state aid formula and things like that on the Finance and Organizational Services website. So with that, it's a very quick overview. They told me I didn't have 3 hours as much as I wanted to fill that full 3 hours of fun. So that's the highlights I have for you. Do you have any questions for Brian or I?
I have a couple questions.
Please.
Do you remember what originally in TIOSA 1988-89, they increased sales tax 2 cents, or was it 1 cent, and then another year, another cent?
I don't remember the exact numbers, but you're accurate. They increased both sales tax rate and income tax rates. And they did that, I believe, stepping up to where they got for the 93-94 aid distribution. So everybody thinks TIOSA started in 1990 and there was more money the next year. No. Income tax increases didn't start occurring until the 1991 tax year, which meant they didn't get paid until 92. Sales tax started, I believe, January 1st, may have started before, and those proceeds. But the details would be in the School Finance Review Commission report. If anybody wants the 131-page report and all that, more than happy to get it to you. But you're correct, it was stepped up. It wasn't just a dramatic, tomorrow we had all this money.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Bryce, could you go back to slide number 20, just because I couldn't read the numbers? That's where we were looking at state revenue sources. And if I'm tracking your report correctly, you're reporting state revenue sources that would include the property tax credit fund, so those payments come into a different line on the AFR and the homestead. So those are part of the tax asking. So when we evaluate school finance and talk about the tax asking, this is carving out the sliver that is actually state funded for 23-24. And I can see it now on the screen. It's the total there, 1.9 billion.
1.98 billion, yeah, just under 2 billion.
So I do think as we evaluate, there was a really significant change that'll be reported on the annual financial reports for 24-25 with the 30% funding of income tax. I think that number's around, and senators in the room might remember, I think that number's around an additional 750 million that would be added to that would be state funded, taken from the property tax side and put on the state funding side. So I do think that as we're evaluating, we will have a new baseline when we look at the 24-25 annual financial reports, and we should keep that in mind when we're assessing the percent property taxes versus the percent state funding. So that was just one observation I wanted to make. And you don't have those annual financial reports aren't reported yet.
I would note, just for the public who might, the 5 out there who are actually watching this, the state fiscal year is September 1 through the following August 31st. So you're only seeing 23, 24 financial information because there's still 19 days left in the 24, 25 fiscal year. So Bryce couldn't produce for you the numbers from this school year, both the state aid distributed and all of these expenditures of school districts. That will come in by November 1st, just for the public to understand the timeline of that and how the legislature, school district's financial year is different than all other political subdivisions and the state of Nebraska. That's a July 1, June 30th.
Bryce, one question. How many schools are in equalization at this point?
$50, yeah.
Thank you.
On average, how often does that fluctuate?
The number of schools in equalization, there was 60 the year prior. So it typically, if there's no major changes to the formula, I would say it depends on valuations a lot, but it's pretty common to see 5 to 10 a year change one way or another.
And I would just add the implementation of foundation aid drove the equalized number down. So I do think we need to keep that in mind, that as we talk about that number dropping, a significant policy change with foundation aid actually reduced the need for equalization. So when we talk about that number dropping, that's a big change.
Well, I think too, property valuation increases is a big part of that. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind, is that that valuation increases is a significant part of that part. But I just wanted to provide a follow-up. The sales tax increase in 1990 was 1%.
But then it went up another one the next year, I think.
Maybe half, because it went from 4 to 5 in 1990. Unless it was reduced.
I thought it was 2 cents, one.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. It doesn't matter. It went up.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
More questions or comments? Yes.
Liz had a very good question. I'm not sure that I understand still. So you say property tax credit, it's the first property tax credit, or it's the one that Senator Breezy did?
So what Liz was talking about is on the state, one too many here. On that light blue line, it says property personal tax credit. On this slide, right now it shows 176 million. In addition to the 176 million for the property tax credit and the other little pieces in there, there's going to be a significant increase showing up in the 24-25 for the school tax credit. The move from what the special session did last fall, moved that into a credit for school districts. That's going to show up in that same light blue box going forward, and that was a significant increase on the front end for the.
So it changes the chart dramatically.
It will. It will. Yep.
So will we have an example of what we think it might look like?
We could produce something like that. I don't have that number right now, but.
And honestly, the school districts haven't reported that data set yet, and it will be reported in November. I mean, so we will in very short time. I know it takes a while to compile those numbers, but I mean, within the course of this calendar year, I mean, we would have the actual number and the shift that would occur. So in fairness, NDE doesn't have the data set yet. Yeah, but I hate to speculate.
Yes.
This is just for my own clarification. The, Bryce, that apportionment funding, what is it, 59 million? Where, is that the BELF money? What is that money? It is the Bureau of Educational Land Funds.
Correct.
Okay, great. I didn't know that's what it was called. Thank you.
I tell everybody that's the school aid funding formula that Congress mandated Nebraska have to be admitted to the State of the Union. 2 sections of land for every township organized in the state. It's the remnants of that.
Well, that cleared it up. Other comments? Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for all the great information here, guys. Appreciate that. Back on slide 10, you mentioned 2.7 billion in total property taxes. What year was that pulled from? Because on a later slide, you talk about 2.3 in 23, 24.
The 2.7 was the total of all 4 of the taxing funds,
What year?
23, 24.
23, 24. Okay.
What was actually received, that's the amount actually received by school districts.
Okay. Very good. 84% of that general fund.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I didn't give the number, but 284 million for the bond fund. I forgot to give that when I was going through in case anybody was writing those down.
What does that 2.7 look like going forward? How about the 25, 26 year? What will that number be?
I don't know. I mean, it will be less because 700-ish million of that will not show up on that line. It'll show up on the property tax credit line. So that will be a shift in that number. But exactly what it looks like, I don't know yet until we get those numbers.
But the 750 will be pulled out of that number?
Correct.
Even though that'll be levied?
Correct. Yep. So
And
a
schools will receive that?
Yes. So in this number, in that $2.7 million number, the actual property tax request for school districts would have been greater than the 2.7 billion by the amount of property tax credit, homestead exemption, those other pieces paid by the state. There's a little bit of personal property tax credit in the 23-24 amount still in there, but those amounts are pulled out of the actual tax request that goes to the taxpayer. So it doesn't show up on that line as paid by a taxpayer.
Okay. But the 750 plus, I believe, that'll be pulled out of there, but growth will erase a significant portion of that, one would think.
Growth, I'm sure, will pull out a part of that. Yeah, I don't know the exact amount.
Thank you.
I found another question for Bryce, if I may. On slide 14, and I'm not trying, I hesitate to ask this, but building projects cannot be paid out of general fund, but they can if they use a building fund, right? Isn't that general fund, the $5, or?
Building projects would have to be paid out of the building fund, which is also part of the $5 levy limit, yes. But they can't purchase land, build new buildings, major renovations shouldn't be done in the general fund.
I agree, they shouldn't be.
Repairs and maintenance type of stuff is an allowable use of the general fund, but.
But haven't there been some schools that have used the 14 cents to build gyms and other administrations?
Well, that would be a building project and would be allowable in the building fund. Yes. So they can tax in the building fund for projects. They don't have, anything that's an allowable use of the building fund, they can tax and use it for that, and that would be an allowable use of the building fund.
Even though it's capped at the $5?
Correct. So they would have to have levy room under the $5 to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
One quick question. I thought it was really interesting when we were going through the history in 1990 when TIOSA was initially put in, 20% of income tax revenue went to the schools, and now it is 2.3?
2.23%.
That was one of the changes the legislature made back in the 1990s, was to, quote, cap the income tax rebate and we can get you the legislative history if you want to see the rationale that was used back in the 90s for that.
So that reduction took place in some point in the 90s, pretty quick
yeah.
after?
They actually limited income tax with net option funding. The total of the two was limited, and net option took whatever it took, and what was left was income tax. And then at some point, they passed legislation that locked the income tax in at 2.23%, which was what it was the year prior.
Interesting.
Which was the other thing the School Finance Review Committee was charged with looking at is with this new TIOSA, how does that impact the enrollment option program that had just started in 1989 that was voluntary then. It became mandatory, I believe, in the 94-95 school year where all school districts had to participate in that program. So I think it's in the document Senator Hughes sent around to you. If you look, you'll find the little changes that have gone, well, the changes the legislature made. I'll let others decide whether they're little or big, so.
Appreciate that history.
If we could, I think we need to clarify the 20% to the 2%, because a lot of people get confused about that. I still think that probably more than 20% of our income taxes goes to public schools. It just doesn't go to the public school that the taxes were paid into. So, and we looked at this several times. One of your problems when you send 20% back to the school where the taxes were paid, it's unequal. You have usually people with high income taxes live in nice houses, so you're doubling down on the unequalization. So that's why the legislature did away with 20% to the district.
One of the things the original commission noticed that where property wealth exists also means individual wealth, and that was part of the disequalizing. You can't fix that in property taxes if the district's valuation doesn't have that much value to it. So it was one of the noted in that original report as to when they looked at the data by district and all that, they saw, I don't know whether I want to say correlation, but if you've got lots of money, you can afford better fixtures on your property, and that therefore returns the wealth back to, quote, the wealthy, and the non-wealthy don't get the funding, so.
Treasurer Breezy.
The 2.21% that was once 20%, how many dollars is that total?
Around 60 million, Michelle? Yeah,
Okay.
around 60 million.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Why don't we do this? We're going to take a break, but when we return, I would like both Bryce and Brian to come back here in case there are any questions that we need clarified during the break. So you two can't quite exhale yet. We'll have you back here. Also, when we come back, I think one of the key things that we need to work through this meeting is what are some goals that we want to work toward as a commission. And we'll break into small groups, and I promise not to do a lot of this as a commission as we go forward, but I'll break into 3 small groups when we come back to talk for 10 minutes or so in the small group about what things we should look at, and then get back and share with the large group so we can really develop a roadmap as to where this commission is going to go, at least short term, if not long term. So with that, we will take a 15-minute break, and we will be back in session. This is a 2-minute warning. 2 minutes until we come back to order.
The restroom.
Okay, good morning and welcome back. We are wrapping up agenda item number 9, where we have Brian Halstead and Bryce Wilson still in the room to get any clarification if there are any questions or any comments based on the presentation that we saw just prior to break. Any more questions or comments? Senator Linehan.
Could we have the slides emailed to us for us old people who can't read the ones that were handed out?
We can do that.
Thank you.
We will do that.
Thank you.
And I believe we can do that yet today, but very soon, if not today. Yes, Shauna.
Thank you very much. I was just wondering if you all could provide a bit of history around the learning communities and how that impacted legislation, just so that the public can get a good idea, and also those of us on the commission as well.
The learning community was created by the legislature between 2006 and 2008. It ultimately got finalized in the 2008 session of the legislature. That act created a learning community based off of school districts at that point in time in Douglas and Sarpy County, because they were the only ones who met the criteria in the statute. There were numerous components to that. There is a state aid that does go to school districts in the learning community and to the Learning Community Coordinating Council from the department in that regard. It got changed by the legislature, I want to say, in 2014. One of the provisions of that act was to mandate school districts to transport kids if their parents picked a school in another school district in the learning community, and then there was the cost of the transportation became a large number. When they dropped that piece of it, they did require that there is a community achievement plan now that all the school districts participate in. that plan is presented to the State Board of Education, and the board ultimately has to approve that. That's a couple components of the Learning Community Act. Now, the learning community itself has the authority to provide direct services to families and to kids in the learning community. So that's a quick summary of that. There at one time was a common levy that was over all of the 11 school districts, and then the funding was determined based on the needs of the school districts. The idea of trying to adjust the inequities that were felt there were in property taxation and ensuring the money went where the kids were. So the common levy also went away. I think it was in 2014 in that regard. So that's a quick off the top of my head summary of that.
What do you recall what the common levy was?
95 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. Ann?
Thank you. As we know, we've been discussing that our due diligence is twofold. One, to look at property tax relief, but also to keep kids at the heart of all of the decisions that we make. So to your knowledge, has there been a study or any track of information in correlation to school funding in Nebraska to educational outcomes?
Help me out when you say educational outcomes. What?
When we look at where funding is going, is certain funding producing better educational outcomes? Is that tracked? Is there a metric that we can track that? Because there is a lot of research out there on poverty, on income. We know that more affluent communities that have more resources have better educational outcomes. So how can we keep kids at the heart of all of the decisions that we're making while ensuring equity, not only to our kids, our schools, but also to our taxpayers?
I don't recall that there's been an official study of that, whether that's been by the legislature and or the department. There's certainly lots of data that we at the department can provide, and the Department of Revenue can provide on that very topic. So you as a commission may decide that's something you do want to look at.
With the school finance research position that was just hired in the fall, we just started to dig into that exact question, but we're at the very surface of that work. And now that position left. So the position's here, but we have to refill that position. So
There's a study that I was just made aware of in the last 48 hours, and I'm going to have to go back through my notes to see who did it, but there was another state, it wasn't in Nebraska, there was another state that did a study on expenditures and educational outcomes. I don't know how educational outcomes were defined, but I suspect it's literacy rates, numeracy, proficiencies, those sorts of things. But I'm going to put my hands on that. When I do, I'll share that. I don't know if it's valid. I don't know if it's something worth our time, but at least the notion of the study caught my interest. I'll get my hands on it. Yes.
I'll speak because I think Dr. Paul Turman would mention this. NSWERS, which we've got going in Nebraska, I think that 2020 is when that was born. That would have a lot of tracking mechanisms that we could marry with different things too by districts, but it would be definitely education outcomes and would give us some good data there. I just want to throw that out there to keep in mind.
Good point. Okay, before you leave, I do want to say thank you to both of you, very much appreciated. Also, Deputy Commissioner Halstead will be retiring from the Nebraska Department of Education relatively soon, as in just a couple of weeks. So this may be the last time you see him in front of this commission at least in his official capacity. Thank you to you both for the work that you did in preparation for today, and Deputy Commissioner Halstead will certainly miss you. Okay, what I really think is important for the commission to really think about now is what is our goal, or what are our goals? What do we want to get accomplished, partially so that we're rowing in the same direction, but also so that between meetings, if there is homework to be done, we know that we're not just bringing you stuff, but rather that we're bringing you meaningful information to help accomplish the goals that we have set in front of us, or that we will set in front of us. What I'd like to do for about 10 or 15 minutes, I will gauge that based on the conversations I hear in the groups, is to break into 3 groups. I would like to have a current senator in each group. So Senator Merman, Senator Bostar, Senator Hughes, if you would be in separate groups. And superintendents, there are 4 of you. Make sure there is 1 of you in each of the groups, and then everybody else can divide out as they would like. I would suggest that we have 1 group over in this corner with Senator Merman, 1 group over here with Senator Bostar, and Senator Hughes, if you would go down to either corner, your choice. We'll have the 3rd group down there, and we will focus in on what do you see as the goal or goals that we need to achieve as a commission. Again, we don't have a deadline, but there are two things I'd like to put in front of you in terms of dates to get something accomplished by. Number 1, you recall early in this meeting, we talked about a report that needs to be generated by this commission for the clerk of the legislature by December 1. That's not very far away. We also have to meet each quarter. We're statutorily required to meet each quarter. So we are meeting that obligation today for the 3rd quarter. We have to meet at least once in the 4th quarter, and we have to have a report to the legislature on December 1. So December 1 is a key date. Another key date is whatever the first day of session is in January. So the very beginning of the 1st quarter for next year. And the reason I think that is another important date to keep in mind is, do we believe we'll have anything meaningful in terms of recommendations to provide to the legislature for consideration in the upcoming session? If so, I'm guessing we're going to need to meet more than the obligation of meeting once each quarter. So think about that in your groups as well. Do we meet once every month? Do we meet once each quarter and to look at this for the long term, or how are we going to approach our cadence from a short-term perspective and then from a long-term perspective? So what are our goals? What visions do you have to accomplish? And from a timeline, what do we want to get accomplished yet in the calendar year 2025? So with that, please go to your groups, and we'll be back in about 15 minutes. Please have a scribe in your group too, or somebody that's prepared to report out on behalf of the group. We've got 5 more minutes on this exercise, 5 minutes. I'm hearing we need more time. So we will go 10 more minutes. 10 more minutes. Okay. Members of the commission, can we find our way back to our seats, please? Well, thank you for taking that time. I got to be honest, when we were trying to put the agenda together, I thought we're going to need some time to just kind of think and pair up and then share. And I'm telling you, I didn't know how that was going to be received, so I was going, I don't know if we do that. It went really well, and I judge my assessment of it going really well based on, I thought 10 minutes, and it was clear to me right away that we needed 15 minutes. And when we got to the 15-minute mark, I came around to a couple of groups and said, are we about done? And I heard, no, we need more time. So that was 25 minutes worth of discussion, so thank you for that. I would like one person from each group to share, and then anybody else from the group to fill in any gaps. We will do our best to capture the conversation and then use that as a driving force for agendas of the future. So how about we start over here with the group that was with Senator Bostar.
All right, team. So by no means do we have consensus on language, but I'll share what some of the concepts were that we discussed that seemed to generate the most discussion. And they're in no particular order. So this is just the order they're written down on my, my piece of paper here. One of them was to ensure that school funding accounts for different needs that exist across school districts. So some of the things that were discussed were student demographics, things like poverty, English learners, those are different across school districts, and continuing to make sure that the funding formula accounts for those differences and how we fund schools in Nebraska. One of the things that we talked about was determining as a commission what we would recommend as an appropriate balance of funding from the different sources. Funding will likely continue to come from different sources in Nebraska. What is the proper balance that we want to have? And what's the system to maintain that balance as variables continually change over time? One of the things that we had talked about is that funding is aggregate, or is it decreasing the variance among levies? That may be something to sort through how we want to approach that. Let's see here. Obviously, part of why this has been developed as a commission is to find a balance between reducing the over-reliance on property tax to fund schools while concurrently maintaining we're properly funding schools in Nebraska, which I inferred might have been what Ann was getting at with her comments earlier, and Ann can clarify later if that wasn't it. Increase predictability and maintain sustainable solutions for three stakeholder groups. Predictability for school districts who are budgeting to serve students each year, predictability for the state who's budgeting each year, and predictability for taxpayers who are paying property taxes. So if we can increase the stability for all three of those stakeholder groups through the work that we do here together, we thought that might add value. One of the things that came up towards the end, we didn't get a chance to fully get through the conversation, but prevent the nature of the school funding model from eroding other intended property tax relief efforts. So plans are put in place to reduce the burden on property tax, and then some other factor shifts that undoes that intended practice. So if there's provisions that we can put in place that protect those, it become more predictable, sustainable over time. And we had a hard time finding the right words for this last one. You know, we had talked about transparency, but there's a lot of transparency already around school funding, and so maybe it was more, how can this committee kind of level set on an annual basis? Where are we at, so that we're interrogating facts instead of having different types of understanding around how schools are funded, and then trying to solve problems where there's a different understanding. So whatever way in which our objectives could imply some sort of a level set that takes place every year to make sure that we're operating from a similar set of facts. Anything I miss, team? Oh, number of meetings, we also talked about. We had talked about we should probably have a meeting every month, given the timeline, and that perhaps having 2 scheduled in the month of November might be advantageous because we'll have 24-25 audited data early November, and we're likely going to need to approve of a report by December 1. So at least scheduling 2 meetings in November, a meeting in October, and a meeting in September at a minimum seems to be a good starting point for the number of meetings from our conversation.
Any feedback from other members of the group? Well, that set a pretty good bar for reporting out. Senator Hughes, who will report for your group?
I'll speak to it, but I think some people are going to jump in. We will start easy. We thought meeting just at least the rest of this year, probably monthly. I think that might be a good plan, the 2 in November and then skip December, of course. So again, we're not all in consensus, but these were we went around and these were kind of top of mind goals for everybody. And please, anybody from my group jump in if I miss something, but equalization. So equalization for students. And I think Dr. Schwartz kind of hit that with the needs side, making sure that happens. Retain local control, levies closer together, and then increase state funding. And that went all the way from just increasing state funding, and maybe it's 1% to 100% of general fund being taken over by the state, knowing that's a heavy lift, but that was thrown out there too, so.
Any other comments from members of Senator? Yes.
Thank you. Well, that last one, that was, I think, my comment. We had developed LB1 for the 24 legislative session, I believe, and that would have required the state to assume the funding for K-12 education. And personally, I think that ought to be the long-term goal. It's aspirational at this point. It's going to be hard to get there anytime real soon, but I think we ought to work through that, figure out how we could do that, and try to set ourselves on a roadmap to do that. And that roadmap would be the state assuming additional funding of education, K-12 education, incrementally over the years. And what would that look like, the end result? And I'd like to hear from the folks in the education community in particular, how do you make that work? How does it work? I have thoughts on what it would look like. I think we would, if we would get there, I think you look at the formula needs and provide state funding according to formula needs. Still have local control, still have your school boards, but you'd have the state footing the bill. Get the property tax, get the schools out of the crosshairs when the property taxpayers are complaining about their taxes. You take over general fund expenditures of schools, the state does, and our property taxpayers are still going to have, I think, the 30th highest property taxes in the country, so they're still going to be paying plenty to other entities. But I do think that ought to be the goal. I think just from hearing Governor Pillen talk, I'm guessing he would like to get there at some point. LB1, we charted a course to do that almost immediately, maybe probably phased in within 2 to 3 years, but that was an extremely heavy lift, finding the revenue to do that. But in my opinion, that ought to be the long-term goal. We need to figure out, does it work? Can it work? Can it work down the road? And then work our way in that direction. Thank you.
Can I also add in something to that? I'll also add that we also discussed maybe even looking at the different parts of the needs formula. Is it still accurate? Is it still working for us? But just looking at the different parts of the formula and determining whether or not some of those things need to be adjusted, if they're still working for our schools, if they're still matching with what our needs are, and if we're keeping up with that as well.
Other questions or comments? Okay. Senator Merman, who will be the spokesperson for your group.
I guess I'll take it, but others are sure, I'm sure will jump in. But we looked at slide 5, and that was kind of the original goals of the TIOSA formula. And if we could have stuck with those goals, I think we'd be a lot better off today. But first of all, equitable opportunity for all school districts. And we thought that Nebraska does a reasonable job at that compared to some other states, but we need to keep doing that, and maybe we can do even better. And then number 2 on that slide 5, to provide the right mix of revenue sources to fund schools, and that's one we've strayed from since the original TIOSA formula, because we're way too reliant on property taxes now. And then the third, I think that would be the state would provide more of the funding for schools, and we were really curious as to what the mix of is now of state funding compared to local funding. And then we thought it'd be good if the TIOSA formula would, if we could make it simpler so that the public would understand it better. Very few people understand the TIOSA formula now, and I know that's a big ask, but if it was simpler, I think, and people understood it better, it is now. And then as far as the number of meetings, we thought we need at least 2 more, and probably more to get to where we should be by December 1st. And anybody else can add to it or jump in.
I would just add, we talked about probably a big portion of our conversation might fall under that appropriate mix of revenue sources. I know people have kind of forecasted out their opinions of what that should be, but that body of work is going to be really interesting. I think once we have the baseline of where we are today, it'll be interesting to see what the state percentage is today. I don't think we have that number. And then what we think the right mix is. I think there's a lot of different opinions around the room as far as what the mix of state versus local should be.
And just one thing that I did forget, determining the wealth of a district based pretty much only on property, we thought, or at least some of us thought that that is not the best way to determine the wealth of a district. Property owners don't necessarily have the ability to pay. Maybe more reliance on income and sales tax to, you know, if you have income, you have a better ability to pay. Sales tax, you do have choice there.
I'll open it up to the whole group now that we've had the comments from the 3 groups. Any thoughts on next direction? I would tell you I heard one theme, and that is that we need to meet more than quarterly. So I will, first of all, if you remember back to the beginning of the meeting, we will be putting together an executive committee. I'll work with that executive committee on how we put subsequent meetings together, but we will plan on meeting in September, and it sounds like monthly maybe, based on what I heard. So that's one thing that we'll do. In terms of preparing an agenda for that next meeting, what do we need? What homework do you need from the Department of Education to be done, from any other entity that we have in the state to be done. And I would throw out, is there any need for bringing in, and I'll put air quotes around the term expert. Do we need to bring in an expert to talk about school funding from outside of the state, or potentially from outside of the state, to address this group? What do we do next, and be thinking about that in the context of what we've heard already? Comments?
I think it would be good if, and I don't know, and we'd all have to agree, we understand it's not perfect, but I think it would be good next time if Bryce could try and tell us where we were 5 years ago as far as the mix in funding, where we were 4 years ago, where we were 3 years ago, what we have today, and what it's going to look like. Because right now we're kind of, we don't know, and I think it would be good for the public to understand that too. There's so much conversation about what we are doing and aren't doing. I don't think it's really sunk into a lot of people how much progress we've already made. And I couldn't agree more, and we talked about it in our group. We've got to do something to educate the public on how TIOSA works, because too many people hear, oh, it's so hard, I can't understand it. It's not that hard. There's parts of it that are hard. Like if you get way down in the weeds, it's hard. But the top three things, how equalization aid is figured, foundation aid, and special ed, that's not hard. So I think if we could kind of have a real simple thing that we can talk about and all understand and the public can understand, that would be a good place for us to try to get to.
To expand on that, you know, Bryce, you did an outstanding job talking about the different buckets of funding, different sources of funding. But given that this is a group that is going to be having some granular conversations, I think all three groups talked about districts having different needs. Right now, the formula has a needs side of the formula, it has a resource side of the formula, and there's a lot of factors that are a part of that. It may be advantageous for this group to get a tutorial on what are the things that are on the needs side of the formula, and generally how are those calculated, what are the things beyond adjusted valuation that are on the resources side of the formula, just so that this group has a chance to understand those elements of the formula itself. And then one thing that might be interesting is, you know, what is the balance of funding from state and local that exists across the other states in our country? I think that would be an interesting thing for us to kind of be able to index against as we get updated data following our audits that we'll do this fall, and we'll get some additional data on November 1. Where is it that we reside compared to our neighbors in other states within our country? I think that context is always really helpful.
I would say along with that, with discussion of the needs formula, I think everybody agrees that we need to increase the level of state funding to reduce the reliance on property tax. I think we need to come to some consensus whether the need side of the formula is working, because that's likely the point forward. If we start increasing state funding, we need to make sure that the need side is adequate.
Ann?
I think for all intents and purposes, we also need to maybe come to, I don't think we'll all come to an agreement on this, but if we can maybe come to a point where we can operationalize what local control looks like and sounds like in the state of Nebraska, and what our long-term goal for local control might look like, and how we want to protect that or keep that, you know, with state funding and how that evolves. I think for the good of the group, it might be great to be able to put some parameters for a definition around that, so that one person's definition of local control might widely vary from another person's definition of local control.
Yes.
I think that's a very important point, that local control. And I guess the scary thing for school districts, if it comes from the state, that with this governor and these senators, it is what it is, but if it all comes from the state 3 or 4 years down the road, then all of a sudden do they tie the hands of the local school boards and say, you either do it this way or you're going to lose some of this. And we've seen some of that happen in, you know, anytime you get money, there's usually something tied to it. And that'd be the scary thing for local school boards and, you know, the smaller districts out west.
If you wouldn't mind sort of expanding on that a little bit on the local control. I mean, I'm interested in hearing more about what are you talked about different definitions of local control. What is yours? And what are you worried about happening in the future, considering two things? One, all the school districts get money from the state now. And two, the state currently has the authority to do a lot of things with education and the schools currently. And there are some things that happen, but a lot that don't. And I hear this sometimes, and I'm interested in understanding more about where some of these fears are and what really are we talking about looking forward, if you wouldn't mind just indulging me a little bit.
I can start and anybody can chime in. I'll speak very candidly. Having the state completely fund our general fund, and if there's certain parameters, does make me a little nervous being completely out in western Nebraska. I don't want to lose the autonomy to be able to offer full family insurance. I don't want to be able to lose the autonomy to be able to set our teacher salaries for our needs, for our cost of living in in the rural area. I can imagine, you know, in Omaha, they wouldn't want to lose, you know, the ability or the autonomy to be able to set their teacher salaries. I know other states have where state funding has come in. There has been loss of local control where individual local bargaining units, excuse me, have gone away, and all teachers fall under the same bargaining unit. It doesn't matter where you teach, what school poverty, what location you're at, what prestigious school you're at. You are paid the same regardless. You're offered the same benefits regardless. I think it's very important that schools are able to have that autonomy based on cost of living, based on location, based on a recruitment, because we know there's a teacher shortage. And so that would really tie the hands when it comes to local control. So that's the lens that I'm looking through as school superintendent. That's my due diligence to my school, to my staff, to ensure that I have high quality teachers, but that that I'm able to put teachers in the classroom and have that availability. And I have to be able to attract someone who wants to come clear out to Brady, Nebraska, in a town of 400 people, and work at our school.
Thank you for that. Wasn't necessarily what I was expecting, but it was part of it, and I appreciate it.
This certainly isn't an all-encompassing answer, so there's an and to whatever I say here that could come later. It's just really hard to account for all the variables. So to have a funding formula that can take into account all the unique differences that exist across school districts, things like sparsity, density, demographic variables, starting points. You know, school A might be at the 98% of their compensation array for staff, and school B might be at 103%. At the point at which a standardized funding formula is put in place, there could be some discrepancies that are maintained indefinitely as a result of that. So you just have so many variances across school districts. When there's only funding coming from a source, it becomes really hard in order for that to be complicated enough in order to meet the needs of school districts. And so, you know, I think it should be all of our jobs here to be open to a lot of different ideas on this commission, and I'm certainly open to a lot of different ideas. I always like the word balance when you think about solutions, because sustainable solutions tend to have some degree of balance to them, and I think that allows for that. The other piece that I would just say is when there is some portion of the funding that comes from your local government or local taxpayers, there is a degree of accountability that exists to the citizens in that local area that I think adds an element of transparency, ownership, and engagement. It's a matter of finding that balance and trying to stay within it. And obviously, over the years, we've seen the proportion of funding shift in different ways. You know, arguably, we've shifted back more towards additional state funding in recent years because of legislative changes. But prior to that, it had slipped the other direction. So I think for us to determine the balance that we're looking for and then have some systems in place in order to manage that probably allows a good, healthy tension to exist as we move forward.
I think there's some ways to address these that I can't recall, so I'm going to ask other senators present, maybe they were. When we did the community college funding, did we not put something in there that said, if we don't do what we say we're going to do, you can go back and levy? Right? We did that. Okay. So I think there's ways to address those fears, that if we all agree this is, well, not us, legislature. The legislature agrees we're going to go this way, they have to put some kind of safety rails around what you can do. I mean, that's the way we did it with community college, if I remember right.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate those responses. I believe that the state should be putting more money into K-12 education funding. And this conversation is representative of some of the conversations I've had around that, where there is reticence related to what erosion of local control that could bring. I do want to say that all of the things that folks are worried about when it comes to losing local control could happen now, could happen without any additional funding. And so, you know, as I think about this, I don't really pair these things together. And maybe that's on me, and it seems like a lot of folks do pair, well, if there's more state funding, then the legislature has more of an ability to reach in to local school districts and change things. But, you know, from my time now, 5 years in legislature, which served on the Revenue Committee, which has done a lot of this kind of work, I'm not sure that's right. I'm not sure, what I'm saying is, I don't think folks should be, I don't think your concern about the erosion of local control is misplaced, but I don't think you should pair that concern with funding. I think that concern should be real, and it exists, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything related to funding. I think the threat, if you will, of interests wanting to micromanage school districts exists even if there was no funding at all. And so I think what I would hope to get to a place is that we don't necessarily fear funding when those concerns aren't truly tied to what we're talking about. But that's just my take from my experience.
Yeah, some great comments here, and I appreciate everyone's input. But going back to what Senator Linehan, former Senator Linehan said, with the community colleges, if the state didn't fulfill its obligation of increasing funding by, I believe it was 3% per year, we reinstated the community college's ability to levy property taxes. In this situation, you know, if we were talking about the state funding K-12 education, it seems to me that that funding amount ought to be tied to a formula similar to what's the needs formula in CEOSA now, and we would calculate formula needs. And I guess I'm under the assumption that that calculation of formula needs with all the allowances that are figured into there would address these potential concerns and potential issues where school districts might need a measure of flexibility. Just see, that's my assumption anyway, that a calculation based upon, or something similar to formula needs with the allowances would accommodate that. But I'd be interested in hearing folks' thoughts on that very issue here at some point.
I appreciate having superintendents from all class sizes here because I think there are unique needs from class 1 school districts in the state of Nebraska to class 2, class 3. So I appreciate that we have a voice at the table and that we keep in mind that, we're not going to be able to satisfy the needs of everyone, but that, we look at what's best for the big picture of all of our students and all of our districts, and try to come up, be solution focused, as I think mentioned at the very beginning, because I think ultimately that's where going in and operating with the intent that we all want what's best for education, and being able to try to get there is our ultimate goal.
I used to think just do with K-12 what we do with community colleges, where you're at right now and 3% per year, but that doesn't work the best in K-12 because situations change, circumstances change, and something tied into a quote-unquote formula need calculation, again, I think would help address some of those issues if we would get that far.
On the formula needs thing, I think it would be helpful, because that, when you get down into the weeds, it does get complicated. So my understanding, and superintendents can correct me, on poverty, it goes up, like if you get, it goes up to 40%. But then if you're at 40% poverty, you get the same amount of money per student as somebody at 80%. I think we need to look at that, because I assume back when they did this originally, 40 years ago, that poverty at 40% was pretty high. That is not high anymore. I mean, it's high, I wish it wasn't, but it's not, it's changed a lot. You have a lot more kids now who fall into poverty than you did in 1990. So I think we need to really key on them that. That one, I know we talked about, because you've got rural schools who have a lot of poor kids, and before we did foundation aid, they were getting, as Bryce said, they got something from the state, but they were getting their resources supposedly covered those needs. And I have questions about whether that's really fair.
So one of the things I'm really trying to do is trying to figure out, are there themes? Where do we go? What are we doing? And I'll tell you the thing that I've done in my career that I feel like most aligns with what we're trying to do right now is, as a superintendent, I had an opportunity to run 4 bond issues, and I learned along the way what to do and what not to do. And one of the things I learned was not to come in asking the community for advice with a predetermined notion of what you wanted to do. And it's really listen and let the conversation and let the community, or in this case, let the commission drive where we need to be. And what I don't know that I have even in my own mind yet what a tangible goal should be for this group. But what I'm hearing is I think we need some. And by the way, when we ran those bond issues, a lot of times we had to dismiss some really bad options before we got to the good option. We passed all 4 bond issues, by the way. So how do we get to a good spot with where it is we want to go? And what I'm hearing from this group is we need more information on a funding mix, the history of, from at least a 5-year perspective. What does that look like? I don't know that anybody said this in particular, but I wrote it down. And quite frankly, I was surprised it took us this long before we talked about it. And that is, are there lessons to be learned from what we did with the community colleges just a couple short years ago? And as Treasurer Breezy said, that might not be the model, but I'm wondering if there are lessons learned as a state that we should look at there. And then also what I've heard is we need to do a deeper dive on formula needs in terms of homework for the next meeting. What else should I have heard that I haven't written down yet? Well, that was a lot of wait time, so I'm going to assume, at least for right now, we need to work on at least on those three things. And then another thing that I heard was maybe some sort of homework on what do states around us do, or other states in the country, what do they do in terms of that funding mix. So not only do we need a funding mix history in Nebraska, but maybe a funding mix of what do states do on a national level. Yes.
One of the things you have to be careful of when you compare the states is we're one of the few states that the state of Nebraska does not collect property taxes. So when you look at funding in different states, a lot of those states collect property taxes. So it's hard to do that. Senator Breezy's done a lot of that work, and we worked on it, but it's hard. It's hard.
Okay. I'm going to go back to something that we did earlier in the meeting, and that was you gave me the authority to appoint an executive committee. And one of the things I mentioned earlier was if you think you want to be on that, or you know somebody in this group that you think should be on that, I think it's a three-member executive committee. I will work with that committee on how do we put this agenda together going forward. So think about that too. And as I mentioned, I believe that within the next week, I will tell the group who's on that executive committee. And if you're wondering, I don't have anybody in mind. I really don't. So if you're interested, or you know somebody that should be interested, please let me know that. Okay, I'm going to ask if there are any other comments before we move on to item 10. It looks like you're all moving on to item 10. So item 10, this time I'll take input on the next meeting of the commission. I think you've given me input on this. Let's see if I've captured that input. That we should meet again in September, and that what we will do from the department office is send out a doodle poll, much like we did for this meeting, and capture the availability of this group as best we can. Anybody have any comments on to add to that, or on how to do that differently? Okay. Well, we'll move to item number 11. Does anybody need a break? We're going to go into public comment, and I don't know how many folks we've got. We're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to come back and do public comment. We have 2 people signed up to speak to us in public comment. 10 minutes. If anybody wishes to speak in public comment who hasn't signed up, please sign up. 2 minutes. This is the 2-minute warning. Okay, if commission members would return to their seats, please. We are okay, commission members, please return to your seats. And we will start with agenda item 11, public comment. We'll now move to our public comment period. The public comment period is allotted 15 minutes with no more than 3 minutes per speaker during the period. Individuals are required to include on the sign-in card their name, city, and state. Any person who refuses to identify themselves will be prohibited from addressing the commission. If at any time persons appearing before the commission exceed the time limitations set forth in the commission operating policies or become abusive or threatening in language or behavior, it shall be the responsibility of the chair to refuse permission to continue to address the commission. We do not have our clock operational right now, so I will give you a 1-minute warning when you are 2 minutes in to your public comments. Again, we've had 2 people signed up to speak today, Dave Welsh and Jim Froman. Dave Welsh, would you please come forward and address the commission? Yeah, and the microphone there is on.
So don't crack any jokes till I get started here. So. All right. Well, hey, it's great to be here. I've worked with a lot of you over the years, and we've got a good commission here. A lot of good ideas were shared today. I thank you for your time. It sounds like you're going to be pretty busy if you're going to be meeting once a month or so here. So appreciate that. Just kind of want to talk a little bit about some of your goals discussion and what goals should probably be for this commission. And I think you've touched on 2 of them that I would pull out. Trying to bring levies down and closer together. I'm not sure the governor said it today, but the governor, I think it might have been in his announcement, or he said it quite a few times, tax policy in Nebraska needs to be competitive with our neighbors. And typically, he's talking about our neighboring states. And we've done some things to try to be more competitive with our neighboring states, but shouldn't that start right here at home in Nebraska, where we have a competitive tax policy? That's why we need to bring levies down and closer together for schools. Currently, we have general fund levies that range from about 32 cents to $1.05. I don't see that as being very competitive. And an example, I'm a farmer, retired farmer in our area, Seward County, Centennial, Milford. The farmer in Milford has to sell his beans for $1 more a bushel just to pay the extra property taxes to his school. That doesn't sound very competitive to me. So that's one goal that I hope the commission focus on, is bringing levies down closer together. The other ones, we've talked about needs of our students. We have unique students all across the state, whether it be poverty, English language learners, transportation. Those needs are important. And the way the TIOSA formula works, most of you know this, you got needs minus resources, you get equalization aid. There's only 50 schools that are equalized right now. Back in 2008, there were over 200 equalized schools.
You have 1 minute, Dave.
Okay, great. And so we need to get your other goal, your second goal should be to try to come up with a policy where all schools are equalized in the state. That's the only way we can change the needs side of the formula and impact every school in the state. You know, we kind of have a two-tiered system now. You've got TIOSA formula, which is focused on equalization aid, and then you kind of have this other kind of foundation aid mechanism, which is on a per-student basis. You know, X amount of dollars per student does not address those individual students' needs or that school district's resources. So I think if we come up with some changes to TIOSA to bring levies down closer together and get all schools equalized, then we can start having a discussion about how do we want to invest in our students? How do we want to have better outcomes? You know, where do we want to focus our dollars on the needs side? You know, so if every school is equalized, then that discussion becomes a lot easier. It's a lot easier to tweak the formula to address those student needs. Am I there? So am I supposed to ask for questions too, or like a regular hearing?
You know, it's a really good question. So we haven't established the forum for this yet, but if you think about from a state board perspective, we don't have the interaction between a presenter or a public commenter and members of the board, but yet from a hearing perspective, we do have that interaction. So if there are any questions that commission members have, certainly go ahead and ask them.
Nope, that's fine. Very much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for letting me come speak, and yeah, good luck down the road here. And I'll try to attend as many meetings as I can. You're on the right track. Keep rolling. Thank you.
Thank you. The next public comment comes from Jim Froman. Unless I am saying the name just horribly. Did anybody sign up to speak that hasn't yet spoken? Well, I will declare public comment closed. And I will say thank you to those who attended in person and who tuned into the broadcast. The next meeting of the School Financing Review Commission will be held in Lincoln, the date to be determined. The August 12th, 2025 School Financing Review Commission is adjourned. For those of you in the audience, the PowerPoint will be on our website on the commission page if you'd like to see it. Members of the commission, we will send you the PowerPoint.